Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Easy Mini Painting with me, Christopher Ridge. So, we're moving on to more of the Doom board game here. This time we're going to knock out all of the Imps, as you can see right here. Now, these guys will take a little while, and the reason why is just because there are so gosh darn many of them. There are just a lot of Imps in this board game. There are 9 of them here. Now, it's going to be a little bit more complicated than what we did with the Marines, but it's still not terribly daunting. Luckily, you actually don't need to use as many colors, just because the colors are much more uniform amongst all of these Imps right here. So, without any further ado, let's get down to it. Let's take a look at what we're doing here.
Alright, so the first thing that we will have done was we would have just done a base coat of white. In this case, I used a white spray primer, and then using just a regular brush and regular, matte black, I just went over the bases. But I just decided to do that before getting started on any of the miniatures, so I just did that. It doesn't really matter. You can do, if you're using a spray primer, you can just spray all of the miniatures, and then you can do the bases after you're done with everything, similar to how we did the Marines. That's up to you. It doesn't really matter. But here we've got our nice white Imps right here, and what we're going to start with are the arms and legs. Now, if you look at the actual 3D art for the Imp, that Imp model, he's actually got sort of dark purplish arms and legs with a little bit of a sort of pink highlight kind of thing. And so we're going to go ahead and try to emulate that here. And to do that, we're going to go ahead and use this dark alien purple. This is just a nice, standard, somewhat dark purple color. We're going to use that on all of the arms and legs for our Imps. You can use whatever kind of brush that you want. You don't need to use anything too detailed because we're going to do a little bit of blending with the tan color that's going to be on the chest and all that later on. But I'll just go ahead and use this random little no-name brush right here. And then, yeah, I'm just going to paint the entirety of the arms and legs on all of them here. I like to think that there's this sort of big thigh piece right here on the top of the Imp's leg. You can use that as the sort of point for deciding that that's where the tan or gold or orange or whatever color you want to call it, flesh color is going to start to blend in with the rest of the miniature. And we'll just use regular purple for the rest of it. Alright, I think that is just kind of a molding line. I think that's just a molding imperfection right there. So we'll just go ahead and go over that. And yeah, like I said, that sort of front piece on top of the right thigh right there, you can leave that white, and we'll go over that with our flesh color later on. Now, one thing that I sort of did in the early versions of the miniatures that I painted for this board game was that I actually went over the claws on their feet here with with a sort of claw color, little bone color, whatever. And if we look at that 3D model again, they don't have that. In the in-game model, at least, their legs are pretty much all entirely purple. So for 2 reasons, we're going to continue to we're just going to go ahead and ignore that. We're just going to ignore the claws or whatever and just do it all with the singular purple color here. 1, because it seems to be more accurate to the game, and 2, because it's just easier. You know, it's just another step that you don't need to really bother dealing with. But if you want to go ahead and go over those little toe claws or whatever you want to call them with, a bone color or something like that, then you can. I mean, it's up to you. It doesn't really matter. It's just something that is an extra step that you don't necessarily have to take, and I don't think it'll make your miniature look much worse if you don't bother with it. But yeah, those are some legs right there. Alright, and then we're going to do the same thing with the arms and legs. Or with the arms, rather. Alright, and I would just say, just sort of blend the purple up the arms a little bit. You can do that by sort of letting the paint dry on your brush a little bit, and then just sort of, lightly using your strokes going up the arms like this, and it will slowly sort of fade like that, as you can kind of see. And then when we do the same thing with the flesh color later on in the opposite direction, coming down the arms, then that should look like a pretty decent blend. Alright, another thing that we're going to look at are the actual sorts of the jaws, almost. As you can see in the original model, they've got sort of purple mouths, even though the rest of the head is that regular tan color. So what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and go over the mouths with this purple. And if you get a little bit of paint onto the sort of mandibles on either side of his jaw, it won't be a huge deal. It'll be easier to go over those later than it would be to go over the jaws after, or the teeth, you know, the sort of mouth here, after having already gone over the jaw. So there we go, that's the kind of thing that we're looking for. Now you might see too that it's not a very clear layer, you know, it's a little bit spotty here and there. So if you want to go ahead and just do another layer, just to give it a little bit more of a, you know, solid, even color, you can. I'm going to go ahead and do that here, just to sort of show what it looks like now versus what it will look like in a moment here. Alright, I got a little bit of a spot on the sort of his left temple right there on his head, but that shouldn't be a big deal. And that'll be pretty much fine. Okay, so you got one imp right there. And yeah, that's the thing, is that you're basically just going to need to do this 8 more times. So this is going to be... The imps are one of the most time-consuming miniatures out of the entirety of the Doom board game, just because there are so many of them, and because they do have, you know, a lot of limbs and gangliness and detail and all that. So they're just going to be time-consuming. Hopefully not terribly difficult, just time-consuming. So you're just going to do that, like I said, another 8 times. Alright. Now that should just about do it for all of the purple there. Like I said, that is a lot of purple. Now, full disclosure, like I said, that's going to take a long time. This whole process, I did a couple of layers on each of them. Took me about an hour and a half, and that's just for this first step right here. Now, they look pretty cool, so I mean, it's not, you know, like, it's worth it. It's not like it's a waste of your time or anything like that, so don't think of it like that. But it will just take a little while, so just be prepared for that. Alright, but after we get all of that purple on there, we're going to go ahead and get started on the sort of gold, orange, red, amber sort of color scheme that their skin has. And to do that, we're going to go ahead and use this Elven Flesh color. This is very bright, kind of got a little bit of an orange, little bit of a skin orange kind of color scheme too. Oh my. Doesn't really matter what brush you use, so if you just want to continue using the same brush that you were using before, I'm sure that would work out just fine. But basically, everything that we left white, we're going to go over with this Elven Flesh color. And like I said, what we're going to do a little bit too is we're going to blend downward, down the arms a little bit, to try to blend the purple and the flesh color sort of into each other. It might be a little bit difficult to do, but again, as long as you've got, as long as your brush isn't soaked, then it will probably be fine, whatever you do. Another thing too is that if you really just don't want to bother with it at all, what you could do is you could just take like the upper arms, like the you know, the bicep and the tricep and all that kind of stuff, and you could just basically go with the tan skin color, with the Elven Flesh color, all around it, and you could basically just leave the forearms completely purple, and that'll look fine. It's probably not going to be an exact match to the actual in-game model. It kind of blends a little bit, as you can see there, but that's up to you. You know, it's just kind of, if you want to do some easy techniques, you can just like I said, do the forearms purple, and do the upper arms with this Elven Flesh color, and that's it. You're good. It doesn't really matter. Although we're going to try to do the sort of blending thing here a little bit, just for, I don't know, we'll call it extra credit. We'll say that we'll do it for extra credit here. You can even kind of like almost blot your brush a little bit, kind of like this, and that'll help to sort of blend it downward a little bit. That's up to you. All right. Yeah, very, very bright. Very bright. But that's the kind of thing that we're looking for right there. And don't worry, we'll darken it up a little bit with the shade that we're going to do. Yeah, just make sure that you try to go around the face a little bit. Like I said, you want to keep... basically, think of it like the face is purple, but the jawline and the forehead and everything like that are going to be the flesh colored. Kind of thing like that. Okay, so then, yeah, like I said, we're going to be doing that basically 9 more times. This shouldn't take as long because a single layer of this Elven Flesh color takes a lot more smoothly than that Alien Purple color does. So this shouldn't take as long, but it's still going to take a little bit of time. It's still going to take a little while, so just make sure you do this and take your time. You know, try not to rush it too much. You know, you're here for an easy paint job, but you don't want to just splotch everything on there and then just do everything willy-nilly, because that's how you get rushed paint jobs, and they just don't tend to look as good. So take your time. Take your time. You're here to have fun. You're here to unwind and relax. Don't worry about it. Take your time. Everything will work out just great. Alright, so there we have all of our imps pretty much completely coated with our sort of base coats. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and bring a little bit of highlights to all of those purple arms and legs a little bit. And to do that, we're going to take out some Warlock Purple here. It's sort of a similar shade of pink, or yeah, like a pinkish or really light purple color that the imps have. And we're not going to go too crazy with it. We'll get out a little drop here, and then we're actually going to do some dry brushing with this. I've got an Army Painter dry brush right here. If you don't have a dry brush, it's not a huge deal. What I would just use in its place is any sort of chisel type brush. So if you've got something like this isn't an actual, you know, dry brush, but something like this that's sort of flat, you know, flat like that, and has a flat edge, and you could use that in its place. But if you want to splurge because you want to, you know, get in on the hobby, or you just want the brush on your own, you can get an actual dry brush right here. So this is an Army Painter brush. Alright, so here's how dry brushing works. What it is you take your brush and you get a little bit of paint onto that brush, but you're actually going to wipe off most of it. The reason why they call this dry brushing is because while you have paint on your brush, it's such a small amount to the point where it's almost dry. Now you can do what I'm doing right here, where you're just sort of taking your brush and you're just sort of lightly nudging it into your little paint puddle right there, and you're just kind of wiping it off, you know, just like that. Again, you don't want to soak your brush or anything like that. Or if you want to, you can just take like a paper towel after getting some paint on the brush, and then just, you know, sort of like pinch the bristles and pull forward, and that'll dry it off a little bit too. That doesn't really matter. I like to do this just because it's a little bit more efficient. You don't waste as much paint by doing this. And what you're going to do is you're just going to lightly go over a lot of the arms and fingers and all that of the imp. Not too much, but just enough to add a little bit of a hint, I guess you could say, of some lighter coloration. Something like that. That's really all that you need. And I'll go ahead and do the same thing with, you know, his legs, both of his legs right here. You can do the front and the back. You can go, you can add, or, you know, you can add as much of this Warlock Purple, this sort of pink color, as much as you want. If you don't like it very much, you don't have to add it at all. If you do like it, you can add a little bit more. It's just kind of up to you. It's whatever you want to do. Remember, the miniatures that you're going to paint are your miniatures, and you can do whatever you want with them. Don't let me try to tell you how to do your paint jobs, because only you can do your own paint jobs. I can't do your paint jobs. All I can do is try to give you a little bit of a path to follow. Just sort of some guidelines, you know. More what you call guidelines than rules. So, yeah, just do this kind of thing right here. And that adds just a little bit of purple to it. We're also going to do one more thing with that paint color, but we'll get to that in a little bit. And yeah, there you go. That's pretty much all that you want to do right there. That looks pretty cool. All right. We're just going to do the same thing with all of those imps there. All right. And there we go. Now we've got our nice sort of purplish look there on all of our imps. Those are already looking pretty good, and we haven't even added our shade for the skin tone yet. So we're in good shape right now. All right, the next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to look at all of their teeth. And they've got some pretty cool smiles on there. You can kind of see right there a little bit, if I can get the camera to focus a little bit. It's kind of tricky. There we go, something like that. Yeah, they've got some teeth on there, but they're not very well pronounced right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to take out some Barbarian Flesh color right here. And this will just be a pretty good sort of, you know, teeth and fangs and horn color kind of thing. And what we'll do is try to find a pretty small brush for this. Just try to find one. I mean, it doesn't have to be like a little itty bitty teeny tiny micro brush, but just one that you can get a pretty good point on, basically. Well, let me find some examples here. And by that, what I mean is, you know, whether the brush itself is small or the point is just small, that's really all that you need. So, like, this is a much larger brush, but it's got a pretty good point on it. This is a very small brush, but it's also got a very, very small point. Doesn't really matter which one you want to use. And, you know, like I said, just kind of look out for the points. When you're shopping around for brushes, just look to see how sharp the point can get. And you're just going to get a little bit of paint onto the tip of your brush. Barely anything at all. And then you're just going to dot each little tooth. If you want to, you can just take a little bit of brush or a little bit of water onto your brush just to thin down the paint a little bit. Sometimes if the paint is really thick, it tends to glob a little bit. But if you just take, you know, let's move that, those out of the way for a second. Just take your brush there, some water. Get it into the paint puddle. That'll thin it down just a little bit. There we go, just a little something like that. Just a little something to bring out the teeth, but nothing too distracting. And take your time with it. I know that these types of parts of the miniatures are very, very daunting to a lot of folks, because a lot of people say, well, I just can't hold my hands that steady. You know what? I bet you can. You just gotta practice. Hold your hands down on, you know, the corner of a desk or something, like what I'm doing right now. And try to support, you know, your miniature with your fingers like this, and with your brush like this. Hold the brush pretty close to the point. That, you know, don't hold it all the way like this. Try to hold it further down to the point. And all you need is just one tiny little dot on each tooth. And you know what? You're going to be surprised at just how easy it really is. All right, and that's pretty much it. Now we've got some nice teeth on all of our imps. Yeah, they look snarly. They look like they're ready to eat you. Looks great. Okay, now I was just realizing this as I was painting teeth, actually, that I completely forgot to do these little back pads. They actually have their own color, as you can see there. They've actually got a little bit of a pinkish color. And that was the second part that I was mentioning earlier about using this Warlock Purple, was that we were going to use it for these back pads. And I completely forgot. But let's just go ahead and do it right now while we're thinking about it. All right, yeah, just a little something like that. That's all that you really need. And just make sure that you do that over all of them. All right, and that's it for all of those pink backs there now too. So yeah, these imps are coming along pretty darn well. All right, and we're almost done. Really, honestly, we don't have a lot else to do. The next big thing that we're going to do, however, is going to be the actual wash. So we'll take this flesh wash right here, and we'll go ahead and do that over all of the skin. And that should add a little bit of shade to the skin. All right, doesn't really matter what brush that we use. Here will be. And you can even do the thing too where you water the wash down a little bit before you... Oh, jeez. Reevaluate my setup here. But you can dip your brush in water, and then get it into, or dip your brush into the water and then get it into the wash, and then that will just help it sort of recede a little bit better. There we go. Now I would say that with this flesh wash, all you really need to do is all of the Elven Flesh color that you did. If you want to go over the purple, it'll be fine, but it probably won't be huge difference-wise, because the purple is already pretty dark at all of the lower recesses. So you can do it, but, like if I were to do it with the hands right here, it probably won't make a huge difference, but, you can still do it. It doesn't really matter. It's up to you. I'll go ahead and do it just to show you what it looks like. There you go. That's one imp right there. All right. Well, kind of. We still have the eyes to do, but I like to save those for last. But yeah, you're just going to go ahead and go over all of the skin tone with this wash. And then you're going to let them fully dry. Another thing that you can do too, if you're not happy with how dark the contrast is, like if you want the shade to be a little bit darker, you can just use one of the darker shades. You can use that strong tone or that dark tone or whatever, and that will just add even more shadow to all of the lower recesses of the miniature. That's up to you. I think that this flesh wash, though, works pretty well for that flesh color. But it's up to you in terms of what sorts of shades you want and all that kind of stuff. It is 100% up to you. And if you don't have the Army Painter brand shades, you could probably get away with using the Citadel brand Agrax Earthshade. That would probably work out pretty well. So you could just use, that right there. That's pretty similar. I think that might be a little bit darker. Or I'm sure that Citadel has their own line of flesh washes or flesh shades that I'm sure would work just fine. But, again, it's up to you, whatever you want to do. I am basing all of these videos off of that Army Painter Mega Paint set, that big 50 paint set. Basically, the idea that I have is that if you do want to buy that paint set, then you're fine. Like, that's all that you need to be able to paint everything that I have on this channel. That's my goal with that, anyway. All right. So now we've got the shades on all of our imps, and they are coming along beautifully, I think. All right, so we've got 9 imps there. All right, and then the next thing that we're going to do actually is we're just going to let them all dry because we want to move on to some details. We want to move on to the eyes, but we don't want for the shade to still be soaking up all of the paint that we would be using for that. So let them dry. Give them some time, and we'll be right back. All right, so now those imps are completely dry there, and they're pretty much done. We're almost done. The last thing that we're going to do is we want to get those eyes, because those eyes are just a little blank right now. And what we're going to do is we're going to take some Daemonic Yellow for that. This is just a nice bright yellow color, basically, and we'll use that for all of the eyes. Don't need very much paint, just a little tiny amount there. If you want, you can use the brush that came with the Mega Paint set here. You can probably get it down to a little bit of a fine point like that. It's up to you. We'll go ahead and try using that for this. See how it works out. But just take your time with it. You're just going to do little tiny dots on each eye. There's one. There you go, and that's pretty much it. So that's an imp right there. We're just going to do that for all the rest of them. Alright, so there you go. Now we've got all of our imps with our eyes. And the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to add layers of varnish to all of the miniatures, just to give them a little bit more resistance to wear and tear and all that good stuff. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to varnish the bases, and to do that I'm just going to use this anti-shine matte varnish, and that will make it so that the bases are not shiny, they're not very reflective, but they're just going to add an extra little layer of protection. Oh, and it doesn't really matter what brush that you use right here. I'm just using this sort of flat brush just because it's easy to use, and it covers the surface area of the bases pretty quickly and efficiently. Alright, so now all of our bases have that matte varnish on them, so now we're just going to varnish the actual imps themselves. Now if you notice, we're not using the matte varnish for the imps. Well, that's because if we again look at some of the video footage of the actual in-game model, the imps are very, very shiny. They're very wet, very slick, very, very wet, shiny looking. So we're actually going to go ahead and just use a gloss varnish for that. Alright, it doesn't really matter what brush you use, so I'm going to just use one of these other, sort of big, bristled ones kind of here. If you want to, you can do that thing where you water it down a little bit. Just get, some water onto the tip of your brush, just like that. Not too much. And then you can mix that in with your varnish, and that'll just thin it down even more, and that'll just make it sort of recede into all of the recesses a little bit more easily. We're just going to go over the varnish with all of these imps, and that's pretty much going to do it. In fact, I'll probably just time skip the rest of this just to save you some time and interest here. But yeah, you're just going to go over all of the imps with this varnish. And then that'll about do it. This glossy finish. And this will make them really, really stand out. This will make them real slick, real shiny. Yeah, just apply it very evenly around the whole miniature. Try not to get it on the base, just because you don't want the base to have that shiny look to it. If you want, you can do this gloss varnish first, and then you can do the matte varnish for the base afterward. Doesn't particularly matter, just whatever you prefer. Either one will be fine. Yeah, there you go. See, there he might look a little weird right now, but as soon as that varnish dries, it will be completely wet and shiny, and it'll look great. So we're just going to do that with all the imps, and then that will do it. That'll call it.
Alright, well there you go everybody, those are the imps from the Doom board game. I think they came out pretty darn well, if I don't say so myself. Yeah, that's the biggest thing about them, is just because there are so many of them, it will just take a lot of time. So that's really the only thing to be aware of, is the fact that because there are 9 of them, and because you've got multiple colors that you need to use, it will just be time consuming. So just know that before you get started on them. But I think that they're pretty satisfying miniatures to paint, so you've got these to look forward to. So yeah, if you like the video, go ahead and throw it a like. If you want to see the rest of the Doom board game being painted, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Next week, I'll probably knock out the possessed soldiers. In a way, it'll be nice to get all of the small monsters knocked out of the way first, because they are the most time-consuming. Just because, yeah, there are so many of them. And then we'll deal with the rest of the monsters as we go. So yeah, go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos of the miniatures from the Doom board game getting painted. And then after I'm done with those, I'll probably move on to the Resident Evil 2 board game. So you have that to look forward to if you have that board game and you want to paint those miniatures. So we'll see you on the next video. Thank you everybody for watching. We'll see you next time. Have a good night, everyone. Bye-bye.